Good morning, everyone. Just want to thank everyone for coming, and today's service is going to be a little bit of a family affair. We're going to have a lot of grandchildren that have loved him through the years are going to come up and say, one or two things, and they were certainly a huge part of his lives. Just a couple of things, and I'll hopefully keep myself short. Is one of the things about my dad was just what an anonymous giver and an anonymous leader he was. He was a hard man to understand sometimes, but an easy man to love. And sometimes you ask yourself why, but he could be a little gruff and a little difficult sometimes, but in the back of it, he was always 100% in your corner and on your side. And especially, with his grandkids. And he didn't have very many vices. He had a drink every day at 5 o'clock, not 5:01, not 4:59, but it was 5 o'clock, and it was just basically one drink. So but it was a time for a social hour, and we were expected to kind of be around during that time and sit and talk. And it was super memorable times, and it's probably where I've gotten most of my philosophy on life, because he could sure philosophize. One of the passages my dad asked to be read at his funeral was really about children and grandchildren. I'd just like to read that now, and it really is actually pretty true. And I'm just now beginning to read some of the things that he found so important to him, and some of them are pretty deep things. He said, and he really felt this way: your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. And I thought that was pretty appropriate. He was one that he would dole out a lot of advice, but in the end, he would let you stick your finger in the light socket and figure it out for yourself, and not have to say a word after it happened. So the last thing that I really have seen written by him was really a note to the grandkids, and it said, "You are great, now go out and do great things." And I think he believed in every single one of his grandkids, and I believed he believed in all three of the boys and our wives, and he was very happy with his family, and he was super happy to be a part of that, and he is the reason all of us are who we are. And I don't know if you guys know him from driving around town, but he had a license plate that said Carpe Diem, and nobody ever knew what that meant, but it's seize the day, and that's what I think he did for most of his life. And I think we'll all remember him. We've enjoyed this week remembering him quite well. So, thank you.
Wow. Thank you all for coming. It means a lot. Obviously, it's hard to be up here to talk about my dad, but James Henry Burrus, what a great name. Chip, I've always been jealous that you got that name. It's just a great, solid name, and we all love my dad so much in so many different ways. We all knew him differently. He wasn't really an extrovert, believe it or not. He was very much an introvert. And he loved just to have one-on-one time with you. If you're at a party, he said the best thing you could give somebody is your undivided attention. And that's proved great advice for all three of us. as we've grown up. And Dad did that. If you came over to our house, I've just got to move around. When you came over to our house, our couches in our house were set up so that they faced each other, and there was a table in between. And the reason was he wanted to spend time with you. He wanted to sit down, and he wanted to talk to you. Alan mentioned last night when you came home from school or came home just to visit, that it was a 4-hour visit on that couch, and you would talk about everything. And for a guy that didn't like to talk much, he would sit there for 4 hours. And then Beth talked about it as well last night. She and my mom would go on to bed, and we would stay up for another 2 hours talking. And it'd be like, what did you guys talk about? And it was like, I don't know, we just talked. And, Dad didn't want to, I don't know if Dad ever really wanted to be an OBGYN. I think he wanted to be a psychiatrist. And if you've ever been to our house out on the lake, when we had the house out there, so much happened out on that porch. You would go out and sit on that porch, and you would just tell him everything that was going on in your life. And he would sit there and listen to you. And he wouldn't give you advice going, you've got to do this, you've got to do this. Like Alan said, he goes, all right, well, what are you going to do about it? You got to figure it out. And that was what helped us think for ourselves. Dad always said, think for yourselves. Don't let somebody else think for you. And so we always appreciated that. Dad had a plaque on his office. It was a message from Henry David Thoreau. He was a big Henry David Thoreau fan. And when they moved from their office to their house up in Morganton, I asked him if I could have it. And it's interesting because this is one of the passages that he wanted to have read. And it says, if a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it's because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured or far away. And I just thought that was so Dad. It's like, you don't have to be like everybody else. Maybe you hear something different. And Dad always encouraged us to be different. I mean, Alan, Chip, and I are all completely different. We have different ways of thinking about things, but he made us think for ourselves, just like his poem that Alan read said. I'm going to miss my dad. He taught me how to wash a car. He taught me how to polish shoes. And I know we're all going to miss him in different ways because he's touched all of our lives. But he was a great man. Thank you.
Hi, for those who don't know me, I'm Parker Burrus. I'm Eric Burrus' daughter who did not get the Moorhead. How many times I will be asked that today. So, thank y'all so much for coming today. It means a lot. I know that my grandfather probably touched y'all in a lot of different ways, and it means a lot that y'all would come out here and honor his memory like this. But I just want to share a couple memories. Kind of when I think about my grandfather, the first thing that pops to my head, like we've all talked about, is how he would sit there and he would talk to you and he would say, okay, rate your life, how it's going on a scale of 1 to 10. And my grandfather, being the total optimist he was, if you said anything above a 7, he would kind of raise an eyebrow and say, no, really, how is life going? And you had to give him the full story, whether it was in 30 minutes or 5 hours. You would eventually spill the beans and tell him exactly what was going on in your life. And he was never a person to try to sit there and solve your problems for you. He was somebody just to sit there and listen to you. And that's a very rare quality to have, I think, somebody who will just sit there and just really genuinely care about your problems and really genuinely want to know what's going on without the burden of having to solve all of them for you. And I think I see that a lot in my dad too, and how you can just sit there and you can tell him your problems and you can say, I don't want you to sit here and get me advice. I want you to just listen. And I think that he acted as a refuge and a safe haven for all of us. When life became a little bit too hard to handle, he also cared so much about each of us and really was protective of his family. And we joke and we say we don't know what he would do with a daughter, but like I told my family yesterday, I asked him one time, I said, Granddaddy, you are one of the most protective people I know. I don't know what you would do if you had a daughter. What would you do? And we were at the beach, and he kind of looked at me up and down, and I go, I can promise you she would not be wearing the bathing suit you were wearing. And I know he was so proud of his 3 sons and loved his sons, and I see a lot of him in each of them, and all of his hard work with Uncle Chip being in the FBI and 2 of his sons being college athletes. I won't mention which one was the cheerleader and which one was the football player, but we inherited a lot from Granddaddy. I've never been so proud to have this name as I am now, just learning everything that I didn't know. He might have been a great man, but he was also a humble man, and it's really been a miracle to hear everything that he's done, all the ways that he's touched people. Like Uncle Alan said, he was anonymous in everything he did. He didn't do it for the spotlight, but he did it because he genuinely cared about people. And so I think that being a Burrus, it's kind of what we inherited from him, and it's what's making Granddaddy be more than a wonderful memory. It's permanent, and it's something that kind of lives within us, and I just want to thank him for an amazing 20 years and an amazing name to try to live up to. I'm Wynn, Parker's sister and Eric's other daughter. Like Parker said, I just want to thank you guys for all being here today to honor my grandfather. I know he'd be really happy to see how many people were here, and it means a lot to all of us. I only had the privilege of knowing my grandfather for 18 years, which is, I'm sure, a lot less than most of you, but I am really thankful for those 18 years that I did know him, and it's come out this week especially, I'm really jealous of some of my cousins and my uncles and other family members who got to spend a lot more time with my grandfather than I did. Just getting to know him longer, but even in 18 years, I saw what an amazing man he was, and as everyone said, how much he touched everyone's lives, and just a few things that I've thought about this week especially, and coming here today. Some things that we've been talking about are, and it's been mentioned, how much my grandfather taught my dad and his brothers, and that is something that my dad has really continued in our family, is just teaching us little things. I mean, my dad even just said it, things like how to polish your shoes. Even a few years ago, my dad pulled me into his bathroom and pulled out his polishing kit and taught me how to polish a pair of shoes just because his dad taught him, and even how to fix a toilet, just little things like that my grandfather taught my dad, and my dad's passed on to us. Another thing about my grandfather that I see in my uncles and my dad is how intentional he was with his actions, and that's something that I definitely see in my dad, and that my grandfather has taught him, is just to be so intentional with everything that he does, and really mean what he says and does. It's been mentioned, but his ability to talk with anyone. I mean, I don't know if you've talked to any of my uncles or my dad, but they could talk to a brick wall. Also, just wanting his family and his loved ones to experience different things in the world. My dad mentioned this earlier this week, but my grandfather was really big on making my uncles and my dad a real well-rounded people, and that's just something that I think he's passed down as well. So I guess what I want to say is that in 18 years of being with my grandfather, and especially this week really reflecting on his life, the main things that I've seen is how my uncles and my dad really have continued to honor him and honor the things that he has taught them, and how I think that they've all passed that down to each of the grandkids. And I think that's something that will continue as we go on the rest of our lives. But I mean, just to get to know people and really care about them, and I mean, like Uncle Alan said, carpe diem, seize the day. So I just want to
thank my dad and my uncles for always honoring my grandfather and teaching us to as well.
Hey, I'm Anderson. I just want to thank my two sisters for taking every speaking point that I had. I was watching just the bullet points I had just be taken one after the other. When my dad was talking, he said that the best thing you can give somebody is your undivided attention. And he's always told me that. And I'm just starting to realize all the expressions and stuff he's been telling me my whole life, he actually got from his grandfather. And so in a lot of ways, I feel like, my grandfather had a role in raising me as well. One story that I'm allowed to tell of my granddad is he always wanted me to go up to Shelby to spend a couple weeks in the summer there, and I never got to really go that much. I know now my parents were terrified of letting me spend the weekend with them. They asked him what would you do if we let Anderson hang out with you guys? And my granddad's like, we're going to take him to a knife fight. And he wasn't kidding. He would have taken me to a knife fight. I was really excited about it. But he was that type of person. And it's been said before, and it's probably going to be said again, but he really was. He was an amazing listener. I was telling him some problems one time, and instead of being like, we'll try this, think about this, he just looked at me. He's like, oh gosh, that sucks. That's all he said. He said, it's tough. And that was a very reassuring thing, because that he cared so much, and he just wanted to listen to you. He knew he couldn't solve all your problems, but he could listen. And I'm really gonna miss talking to him.
I'm Meredith. I wasn't planning on saying anything, but I realized I have just two things.
I'll never forget when Meg said at her wedding how much he and my grandmother taught her about love and how to love and how to treat one another when you're in love, and I've had very high expectations for all of my boyfriends ever since that, unusually high. So it's worked out well though for me. Got a great one now. But the second thing is he taught me a lot about patience, and I'm a little bit of a hyper person, and I'll never forget he kept bowls of trail mix and little M&M mix around. Of course, I'd pick out all the M&Ms, but I'd also put about 40 pieces in my mouth at one time, and he'd say, one at a time, Meredith, one at a time, just one at a time, and I'd get in trouble every time I'd see me picking 2 or 3 or 4, and that's just an important thing to have. So patience and love, and this other very, very, very long laundry list of lessons and meanings in life. So I'll always remember these things and think of him forever.
I'm Haley. I'm Alan's daughter, and I'm not really good at ad-libbing, so I wrote it down. I said, Granddaddy was an incredible man, but more importantly to me, he was the best grandfather a girl could ask for. When I heard of his passing, I started looking through all the pictures and emails and notes he'd sent me over the years, and reading through them reminded me of how witty he was. Even though he was kind of quiet in person, he had incredible wit and constant knowledge, and he just had an innate sense for taking care of others. In every note, there was always a suggestion on what I could do to make someone else's day, and he just always thought of things like that. And he started every email with "Hello, beautiful granddaughter," and ended it with "You're so special to me," or "I'm so proud of you." And he really was. He really felt that way about each and every one of us in his family, and he was so proud of everyone. And he was really the perfect glue that kept us all so close together over the years. And I know the bonds that he established will remain strong with us in his memory, because he's made us all so close. In Christmas 2011, all he asked for was from every person in the family was a letter from each of us just detailing out all of our favorite memories with him. And I remember writing that and thinking, like, how could I ever pick just a few, because my strongest memories of childhood are all with him and this family. So, but the thing that sums it up the best is for Megan's wedding, I was putting together a recipe book, and he sent me, of course, all of Grandmommy's recipes, but he also wanted to send his own recipe for an afternoon delight. And his ingredients included grandchildren, peanuts, bourbon, water, ice cubes, cola, cherries, ginger ale, and skewers. And he said to perch granddaughter on countertop, measure bourbon in a jigger, add ice, have granddaughter add water and stir gently because he didn't want to bruise the bourbon. And in our own glass, he'd let us mix our own cola and ginger ale and add cherries. He'd pour peanuts in the bowl. He'd take us off the counter and go to the porch or boat. And we talked about his 5 o'clock drink, but it was very important to him. And he said, settle in with granddaughters, talk to laugh, philosophize, tell lies, listen to giggles and dreams, see a sunset and share peanuts, enjoy and repeat tomorrow. Which is really fitting into his recipe because, as we all know, he was very much a man of habit. But every moment with him, whether we were riding on his tractor or eating peanuts on the porch or learning to drive the boat or sitting on our gazebo at Ocean Isle and getting grandfather advice, was meaningful because he was just a spectacular human being. And whenever we parted ways and we're pulling the car away, like anytime, he would always stand and wave until we were completely out of sight. I mean, he'd stay there for 10 minutes if he had to. It was one thing I could always count on, and it just seems like a really fitting image here because I know he's looking at each of us and waving with pride at the life he had and the life that he gave to so many coming into the world and the legacy he's leaving behind. So.
I'm Megan. I was the first grandchild, and I hope you don't mind me reading what I wrote. It meant a lot this week to kind of reflect on the man that my granddaddy was. And it's funny because he probably wouldn't be too happy about all of us up here talking about him. He was a really humble man, and he never liked being the center of attention or anyone making a big fuss over him, but I hope he's okay with us making an exception today. When I was born, he delivered thousands of babies and raised 3 boys, so you would think he wouldn't be very fazed when another baby came into the world, but I don't think even he knew then what this next phase of his life was going to look like. And I know a lot of you here have known him for a lot longer than we have, and might argue that his greatest accomplishments were when he was doctor and when he served in the Army and raising his family, but I think that all of us up here would argue that his finest work was as a granddaddy, and he was the best. I spent a week every summer at their house, and it was consistently the best week of my whole year. Like my cousin said, 5 o'clock was his magic hour on the lake, and he would have his 2 drinks for Grandmommy and him, and a special drink for me. And it was some of my best memories on that porch, the lake house, and he taught me so much. He taught me how to drive a boat, how to finish my plate, how great of a store Big Lots was. He taught me how to change the oil in my car, how to address someone correctly, how to give a good handshake, how to stir a drink without bruising it. And most importantly, though, and what everyone sort of echoed, is just how important family was to him. And I couldn't imagine being prouder of where I came from being born in Shelby, and he made that happen. He once wrote in an email to all of us. He said, "This is a family, not just a group of people related by birth or marriage. And that's exactly what two scared newlyweds knew that we wanted as this journey began in 1955. I won't read the rest, but he was the rock of our family, and I don't know how it's ever going to be normal without him, but I know that all you would want, and the picture I have is just from the Ocean Isle Beach Week of him sitting in the gazebo and rocking chair and a cold drink and his tinted sunglasses, and that was his happy place, and that's kind of the whole week where I've been picturing him just in heaven in that gazebo. And I know how happy he'd be right now just to see all of us come together, all the people that meant so much to him. Albert Einstein once said, "Our death is not an end if we can live on in our children and the younger generation, for they are us. Our bodies are only wilted leaves on the tree of life." And then I'll just close by saying something he always said to me every night as a little girl going to bed. I think he got it from his time in Germany, but he would say, "Schlafen Sie gut," which meant sleep well. I love you, and I'll miss you. Thank you.